Congress just blew a hole in one of the oldest gun taxes in America. And if you think that means you can now buy a suppressor or an SBR with zero paperwork, that mistake could wreck your life fast. Quick question before we go any further. Are you subscribed yet? Because updates like this are exactly how good people avoid dumb legal mistakes. If you care about your rights, your money, and staying out of trouble, hit that subscribe button right now. Here's what just happened. Congress passed a major change through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and that change cut the federal NFA tax from $200 down to zero for several items starting January 1st, 2026. That includes suppressors, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, and what the law calls AOWs, which means any other weapons. In simple terms, the old tax stamp cost for those items dropped to zero. Now let me explain why this matters so much. For decades, that $200 tax was not just annoying. It was a wall. It added cost, delay, and fear. It also kept a lot of regular gun owners from even trying to own a suppressor or SBR legally. So when Congress knocked that tax down to zero, that was not a small tweak. That was a huge change. But here's the crazy part. Most people hear zero tax and think zero regulation. That is dead wrong. The tax changed, the registry did not. At least not yet. That means if you want a suppressor or SBR today, you still have to go through the NFA process under federal law. You still need the right form. You still need to submit fingerprints. You still need a photo. You still need a background check. And you still need approval before you take possession or build one. So yes, the price dropped. But the paperwork is still very real. Here's what most people get wrong. They think the $200 was the whole law. It wasn't. It was one part of the law, a painful part, yes, but not the whole machine. Imagine this. A guy at your local range says, "Bro, the tax is gone now. Just buy the suppressor from your friend and you're good." That is exactly how somebody turns a rights issue into a felony issue. If that item is still covered by federal registration rules, a private shortcut can put you in serious danger. The tax being zero does not mean the transfer process disappeared. And there's another part people miss. Machine guns and destructive devices were not included in this zero tax change. So if somebody online tells you the NFA is dead, that is not true. The law is wounded maybe, but dead? No. Now this is where it gets interesting. The reason this tax cut matters so much is not only because you save money. It matters because it opened the door to a much bigger legal fight. Gun rights groups looked at this change and said, hold on. If the government spent decades defending this law as a tax law, what happens when the tax is now zero? That is the question driving the next battle. One of the biggest pushes came from Gun Owners of America and its allies. They announced and filed a federal lawsuit arguing that if the tax is gone, the government has a much weaker reason to keep forcing registration for these items. In plain English, their argument is this. If the law was held up as a tax system, and now the tax is basically gone for these items, why does the registry still survive? That is a massive question. And no, it is not fully settled yet. So if you click this video thinking, sweet, the registry is gone, slow down. The registry block is being pushed in court. It has not become the law of the land yet. That distinction matters more than most people realize. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the exact mistakes gun owners make when they trust headlines instead of the actual rule. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Let me break down the second big piece of this story. Congress gave gun owners real tax relief, but it did not fully remove suppressors or SBRs from the NFA. That means we are in a weird middle stage right now. The cost barrier dropped, but the legal trapdoor is still there. And that middle stage is dangerous because it confuses people. Most people think the hard part was always the money. But the truth is, the hard part has often been the process. The wait, the forms, the fear of making one small mistake on a serial number, barrel length, trust name, address, or transfer detail. That is where people get burned. Here's a hypothetical example to explain this. Let's say you want to build an SBR. You hear the tax is now 0, so you assume you can slap the short upper on, put the stock on, and file later. That is exactly backwards. If federal approval is still required before the making happens, then doing it first and filing later can create a serious problem. Zero tax does not mean zero permission. Same thing with suppressors. If you think a $0 stamp means you can walk out same day with no approval, you are setting yourself up for trouble. The money part changed. The approval part still exists. Now, quick legal note, this is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. Here's the part nobody's talking about enough. State law can still crush your plans, even when federal law gets better. A lot of gun owners focus only on Washington. I get it. Federal law feels bigger, but your state can still say no. Several states still ban civilian suppressor possession outright. So even if the federal tax is 0, your state can still block you. And with SBRs, state-level rules can get messy too. Some states are friendly, some are not. Some are full of gray areas that punish people who guess wrong. That means your real checklist is not just, did Congress help me? It is, what does my state allow? What does federal law still require? And what has actually changed as of today? That is how smart gun owners think. Not emotionally, not based on memes, not based on one loud guy in the comments section, based on what changed, what did not change, and what can still put you in handcuffs. Now let's talk about why the registry fight matters so much beyond just convenience. A federal registry is not just a form. It is your name, your address, your fingerprints, your photo, details about your firearm, and government approval before you can exercise what many people believe is a protected right. That is why this fight has so much energy behind it. For many gun owners, this is no longer just about saving $200. It is about whether the government can keep treating common gun accessories and short rifles like they belong in a special federal list forever. And supporters of the court challenge keep pointing back to an old Supreme Court case from the 1930s. The short version is this: the NFA survived back then as a tax measure. So now the legal question becomes, if Congress just gutted that tax for suppressors and short-barreled firearms, does the rest of the system still stand the same way? That is what the courts may have to answer. Hey, real quick, a huge chunk of people watching these videos still are not subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the community of gun owners who want the facts early, not after a mistake. Hit subscribe and stay ahead of the next update. Now, here's the third big thing you need to understand. Even though the registry fight is being pushed hard, you cannot act like it already won. This is where people make the biggest mistake. They confuse momentum with victory. Yes, Congress moved. Yes, the tax was cut to 0. Yes, lawsuits are attacking the remaining registry system. Yes, more groups are trying to weaken or remove these old NFA barriers. But until Congress fully changes the law or a court actually blocks enforcement, you still live under the current rule. That means no shortcuts. No, my buddy told me. No, I saw it on TikTok. No, the title said nationwide block. No, I thought the courts were about to strike it down. If you possess an unregistered NFA item that still requires registration, the government is not going to shrug and say, fair enough, he watched a thumbnail. That is not how this works. So what should you do right now? First, verify whether your state allows the item you want. Second, make sure the item is actually one of the categories affected by the zero tax change. Third, use the correct current federal process. If approval is still required, get approval first. Fourth, keep copies of your paperwork and confirmations. Fifth, do not assume older advice still applies, because this area is changing fast. And sixth, do not confuse a legal argument with a legal outcome. That is probably the most important one. Let me give you a real-world mindset that can save you pain. Think of this like a bridge under construction. Congress opened one lane, That is the tax lane. But the other lane, the registry lane, is still being fought over. If you drive like the whole bridge is open, you could fly straight off the edge. Now, I know some of you are asking the big question. Could suppressors and SBRs eventually come out of the NFA completely? Maybe. There are still separate bills and legal efforts aimed at doing exactly that, especially for suppressors. And now that the tax piece has been slashed, the pressure on the rest of the system is stronger than it was before. That is why this moment matters. Congress did not finish the job, but it changed the battlefield. That is also why this story is bigger than a $200 savings. This is about momentum. First, the tax barrier falls, then the registry gets challenged, then courts are forced to answer questions that were easier to dodge before. That is why so many people are watching this issue closely. But wait, there's something even more important. If you are the kind of person who likes to be prepared, this is the moment to get educated before you buy, build, transfer, or travel with anything that could trigger NFA rules. The people who stay safe are not the people who panic last. They are the people who learn first. Laws are moving fast, lawsuits are moving fast, and one wrong assumption can outlive the headline that caused it. Subscribe now, because the next video is going to cover exactly what changes if the registry challenge starts winning in court and what you should do before that happens. Here's the bottom line. Congress did pass a huge change by cutting the federal NFA tax to zero for suppressors, SBRs, SBSs, and AOWs. But the federal registration system for those items has not disappeared yet, and that is exactly why the next fight is now focused on the registry itself. So do not make the mistake of celebrating too early and acting too fast. Stay sharp, stay legal, and stay informed. If this video helped you separate fact from hype, subscribe right now and share it with one gun owner who needs to hear it before they make a very expensive mistake. And one final reminder, this is general educational content, not personal legal advice. Laws can change, courts can change things, and your state may be stricter than federal law. So always check the current rules for your specific situation.